pedestrian conversation that we are willing to ascribe it to.
Now, at this point, where we're talking about, stopping this, the stealing or the looting, as you put it, of Nigeria's crude, the federal government has taken a step to, people are not. Some people are not happy with the fact that government, Polo, also known as Tompolo, has been given a contract to protect pipelines and oil infrastructure in the Niger Delta region. Many people from the Niger Delta commend the move and saying, let's one of us, protect this thing. Recall that during the Yar'Adua administration and even the Jonathan administration, people like that were given contracts to protect the pipelines. This administration also, at some point, declared Tompolo a fugitive. And now they're giving a contract worth billions of naira to this same person. Help us understand this. If a person was declared criminal and now they're giving him a contract, should the people be celebrating? Because we've seen protesters from the north, northern groups saying, look, this should not happen. And at a time when the north is bleeding, people are saying that the Nigerians in the north cannot acquire arms or get arms to protect themselves. The government is giving billions of naira to the Niger Delta youth, which would mean that they're going to acquire weapons to protect the pipelines and all. What does this mean to you?
Yeah, I think that. Yes, so I hear your question, right? I think that the challenge is the way Nigeria views the resource that is oil. There is a fixation on oil that is inordinate, and that's where the problem lies. You can see the very pragmatic approach that government has decided to adopt when it gets to dealing with the issue of oil theft. Because Nigeria's production is way below the budget benchmark and also the OPEC quota. OPEC put it at 1.8 thereabouts.
Yes, 1.8 million barrels today.
Yes. And we are far below that. So you can see the responses that's coming from the government side. They have decided to do something pragmatic. We saw this in the past. During the Yar'Adua administration, we saw the issue of amnesty for the militants, right? Government adopted a pragmatic approach. They decided that, look, oil has to flow by any means possible, right? So it is about that inordinate fixation on oil as a resource in itself. I want us to have that in our mind and to contextualize this within a broader, global economic context of the energy transition. That oil as a resource is not going to be relevant forever. But let me come back to your question, which is about the issue of the Tompolo contract. It is not the first time Tompolo has been given a contract like this. In the past, we saw militants given contracts like this, and again, that was about using pragmatic approaches to keep the oil flowing. But the question is, why should Nigeria continue to empower criminality, to put the power in the hands of people we have known to be the problem in the first place? This is the question Nigeria needs to keep addressing. We are having non-state actors assuming primacy, taking over duties that are supposed to be state responsibilities, duties of providing security. So when this contract is finally signed, this company is going to, Tompolo's company is going to acquire weapons, right? Not so. They will acquire vessels, acquire weapons, and then tomorrow, just like we saw in the past, the contract will end or the contract will be annulled or terminated. And what happens to the firepower that was acquired? It goes back into the shadow economy. And that is why Nigeria is perpetually dealing with issues of criminality, issues of banditry, issues in the north. We are seeing the same thing playing out. Boko Haram militants and bandits are being given amnesty, and given scholarships and things like this. We cannot continue recycling this thing or incentivizing, criminality in this country. It is a very distorted approach to solving the problem. Now, NIMASA had a $102 billion contract on, to company before now. I remember, I think that was 2016, that contract was it terminated, or they had to run in with the EFCC, and we didn't hear the last of that. Today, the same government is going back to the same person. I think the government is just saying that they know who the criminals are, they know who the oil thieves are, and they're just validating that fear, that concern that we've had, that all along, this government has known who the criminals are, and they are just subjecting themselves to blackmail by conflict entrepreneurs and international cartels that have been eating this country dry. I think that the debate around Tompolo is actually minimizing the issue. It's actually minimizing the issue as much as it symbolizes the ineptitude of government in addressing, security and economic challenges. It tends to bring the issue to a very pedestrian level. It goes far beyond that. It is about government stepping up to the plate on its responsibility. I mean, the government has not handled this matter right. It's very clear for even a primary school child to see.
Well, with the losses that we've incurred in the last few months, do you think that this move by the government is just to settle the boys so that those who are making noise can just shut up for the meantime while this continues? Because a lot of people do not believe that the likes of Tompolo would be able to ward off criminals that are able to acquire or even hire such ships that would come into the country to steal Nigeria's crude. Do you believe? Do you agree with those people who make this assertion?
We're talking about militants who have, we should also recognize where the aggression came from in the first place. This is not me trying to countenance or take a position on militancy one way or the other, right? But this is about recognizing the root of the problem. The oil and gas establishment in Nigeria, that is the government that is intent on drilling by any means possible, and the corporations that are intent on drilling, whether no matter who stops is God. These two are bedfellows in the disempowerment of the Niger Delta people, and that's where the problem came from in the first place. This is not trying to excuse oil theft. And of course, when we talk about oil theft, like I mentioned at the outset, we are not referring to that level of, artisanal theft of oil. So, what needs to be done is that, especially under the new regime of the PIA, government regulators need to step up to their duties. We do not want what needs to happen under the EPR, where and the defunct NNPC, we had stories about pipeline metering infrastructure coming in and disappearing, technologies being imported, and some people high up in government frustrating the use of such technology. This is a country where we do not even know how much oil we are producing. So we are even talking about a lot of missing data in the shadow. We do not know what is produced at the wellhead, for instance. What we have, we rely on are figures from export terminals, and these are figures that are just handed down to government regulators by industry players. this is unconscionable. It's not something that government should allow going forward, especially within the ambit of the new PIA regime. So we need to know the difference between what gushes out of the ground or the seas and what gets to the export terminal. In the middle of that, yes, a lot of losses happen for inevitable reasons. But a lot is also stolen. Those that happen for reasons that are production related and inevitable, there are scientific ways to estimate that, right? But anything short of that would have been stolen. In fact, there are certain schools of thought that believe that what Nigeria actually gets to export, or what is stolen from Nigeria's crude oil, is more than what.
You have less than 1 minute for this call.
So it's really a massive problem. And going back to your question, that
Mr. Bolton Akwan, I would have to reconnect with you shortly. Just reconnect with you in a bit. The conversation continues. This is your radio experience. You can count on federal government doing what it can to, avert or stop the stealing of oil of Nigeria's crude. We'll be talking more about that with my guest this morning, and we open up the phone lines as well to have your thoughts in. Stay with us.
Eagle. Tune into a breath of fresh air. 102.3 Extra, weekdays 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with Lee J. Cheers to something new.
Eagles Morning Rise. Eagles Morning Rise with
Hannah Choprince.
And now the conversation continues. We've been talking with Tija, CSO, focused on economic and ecological justice, is joining us this morning and sharing thoughts with us on the oil theft situation and, well, the contract awarded to Tompolo for the protection of oil installations in the Niger Delta region. What are your thoughts? You may want to ask questions or make suggestions. 09073530044 and 09087668888. You can also send us messages on 09097054450. Mr. Bolton Akwan, let's ask you this. I've always wondered where this crude oil that's refined locally or artisanally, as you mentioned, and they say, oh, this oil, this PMS that you're buying was refined locally. Where do they sell this? Because does it mean, because somebody has said, look, the rot in the oil sector is one that cannot be explained. It's multi-leveled. How do we, how help us understand how, I don't know if you know, help us understand how this oil, how this crude is refined and how does it get to the market? Where do they sell the crude? Would it be to the oil major marketers who claim to import and are paid subsidy? Or do they have a different fuel station or whatever where they discharge this locally refined or illegally refined crude oil?
Yeah, I think that that's within the artisanal refiners now. And the products, however, are actually competing in the market with what we call the imported refined products. And that is why they get to mix up the filling stations. They are put on the streets. We have a lot of the people who consume the bigger part of the oil products actually buy in bulk. So, for instance, hotels use diesels, and other consumers that buy in bulk. These ones, a lot of them depend on the products of artisanal refineries. So that they are still in business shows that the quality might not be the very best, but that the quality is actually holding sway. And that brings me to the issue of the marketplace. So the marketplace, especially for stolen crude, now moving away from the artisanal ones now, in the news, a tanker loaded with crude that escaped Nigeria's security West African coast. This is happening all the time. We get to hear this in the news all the time. where does all that crude go to? Which refineries? So it takes two to tango. Nigeria will need to work hand in hand with its, allies in countries that refine this crude to ensure that those refineries don't take on stolen crude. There are ways to fingerprint crude. Every oil has its DNA, depending on it's legitimately from that source country or not. And that is where fingerprinting technology comes for. Oil theft at that level can also be deployed. In fact, when we deploy it at that level, it has solved a whole lot of problems. The issue of even the artisanal refining and the supply chain for it will just become a non-issue. Because most of the time, these artisanal refiners actually tap into the remnant damages that have been done by the high-scale, refiners. So we go to the communities, and the community people tell us that they don't do their own finish, we do our own. You get the point. So that's key. When you talk about these artisanal refiners working, what are the responses of the security agencies? Most of the time, we have the JTF operating across the Niger Delta. What do? They go destroy these fire sites, and after a while, you see the sites springing up again. What happens if you go in there to properly investigate, and many journalists, including foreign media, collaboration between the military operatives that are supposed to stop the artisanal refiners and the operators of those refiners. So when you see them clamping down on it, know that there has not been enough settlement. And that was why Governor Wike, raised the force he did, last year on the artisanal refining. So there is there are whole lots of dimensions, security failures, and so on. We see people lobbying to be posted to the JTF in the Niger Delta, right? Because it is very lucrative. But
I'd love us to talk about, that tanker again, the super tanker and the Nigerian security. Recall that, before the Navy arrested that ship, it had passed, the Nigerian maritime environment, got into the oil field, headed for the oil field. And some people say, look, that tanker had been supporting or aiding this, this criminality. Supporting or aiding this, this criminality. What can be done to...
Very true, my brother. So you see, in 2009, a tanker was arrested in this country. It was under the purview of the Navy, and suddenly it disappeared. It just disappeared, vanished into thin air. We do not know what became of it until today. That was, I think, about 10, 12 years ago. So you see, these things happen repeatedly in this country. We have become inured. We have become desensitized to, outrage. Very outrageous things happen, and we just, treat them like everyday occurrences, because of course they occur every day. But the country shouldn't. A country that has a government should not allow such things go undealt with. So like this current case, what happens to investigating to see who did not do their job well, and perhaps, who was compromised to allow that tanker go, escape Nigerian waters? So these are some of those by rewarding militancy, as we have seen in the Tompolo contract. It is by addressing the security failures of Nigeria.
Do you think that this can change, looking at the situation where it seems like these people who are benefiting are highly placed, and they would continue to do this irrespective of how bad the economy gets? Because for them, it's about personal interest. If their pockets are filled or lined, then, Nigeria can go to, blazes for all they care. How do you think that, do you think that there's a possibility of any government putting a stop to this?
Nigeria needs to finally, decisively address an oil-producing country when we do not know how much of the matter. The other thing has to do with the PIA regime that has come into force last month. Now we have a new overarching regulation for the oil and gas sector that continues to be insensitive to the needs of the communities and the environment of the region that produces this oil. The PIA actually furthers the exclusion of the Niger Delta peoples. It takes away the power and puts it part on the laps of the oil and gas, corporations. So they determine what happens at the community level. So this whole thing is going to deepen fragility. We're talking about conflict. We're talking about people being angry in the Niger Delta. That anger is like child's play compared to the time bomb that is ticking and waiting to happen.
Speaking of the PIA, the Niger Delta had stakeholders who made inputs in the PIA. Although I know that they're still aggrieved with the 3% that's going to the oil producing states.
So yes, there were stakeholders that made inputs. Niger Delta leaders made inputs at the presidential level, civil society organizations, community groups. They made their voices, used every channel to make their voices heard. You saw what happened, where civil society organizations and community representatives were shouted down, while the oil and gas companies were given all the time they needed to speak, to present their positions on the PIA. Little wonder we saw a PIA where the Chapter 3 dealing on host community provisions was just child's play compared to the very germane recommendations that came from the peoples of this region. So the government used the PIA to further deepen the dispossession, of the peoples of the Niger Delta, and that is not something to be taken. Wants to actually get the optimum from its oil wealth, from its oil resources. That has to be fundamentally addressed. The role of the communities and the place of the environment. Today we are talking about a divestment of companies moving further offshore. What are they running away from? So you come here, you mess up the environments of the people, you destroy every fiber of their social and economic life, and now you want to move further offshore where you escape accountability, and if you could not be regulated onshore, is it when you are out of sight of the regulators that don't even have the facilities to check on you? When there is an oil spill, what happens to Nostra? They depend on the oil companies. DPR depends on the oil companies, to check on the using their facilities for logistics to regulate them. How can I be regulating you and depending on your own facilities and equipment? It doesn't make sense, and that is what has been happening. So today they are moving further offshore, and you expect there is going to.
My name is Maiwa. The something billion naira is too much. I will not in totality condemn the engagement of Tompolo, because in a normal environment, I want to liken him to the issue of vigilante to support maybe police because of the inadequate personnel. But I want to say that the way government went about it. It shows that even if there is external aggression in Nigeria, our sovereignty can easily be surrendered. There are better ways to do this. What we need to do is to recruit more personnel into the conventional policing system, the Navy, the police, and the Air Force. If you do the capacity with the resources and equipment to police the Nigeria territory. And if you do that, nobody will come out with this kind of noise. But when you figure out an individual that has been quoted with crime and criminality, And you are now recognizing a failure of the consumer solution system in Nigeria, and it's not encouraging.
All right, Mayowa, thank you very much for calling. Appreciate your thoughts. Let's bring in, let's read Ogenemano's message. Ogenemano, I was thinking you say, why the oil theft is still on till today is Ace, the music. All right, I'll bring in another caller. Our clock is in the ceiling. We'll have to wrap up quickly. Now, Mr. Bolton Nakpan, let's talk about the host communities and some communities that had been destroyed by the oil spills and all. How far has that gone, and what are you doing as CSOs to ensure that the cleanup is actually achieved? Before you respond, I'll bring in this caller who's been on the line. Hello, good morning. Morning, good to have you. Quickly, please.
Yeah. I can hear you clearly.
Go ahead.
All right. Thanks to your resource person, it's very deep. I happen to have worked at the creek with an international company, and if you know the truth and the mess in that creek area and around the refinery areas and all of that, you'll be sick to your very spirit. And we'll have degradation all over the place. You guess what? If the citizen of the country can go to international courts and win cases against Shell and other companies, and they'll pay in billions, it questions the loyalty of the government to these people. I mean, where's the commitment here? Is it everything we do? It's a mess. See, the production level of Nigeria till tomorrow, it's over 2-point-something million barrels per day. All of these, is dropped down to this are just rhetorics and stories. It's vessels that you take about 4 days to a week to fill up, we load and start moving, and it moves at a snail pace, and move, and then nobody sees it. It's invincible. It is now Guinea-Bissau that now sees this one. This will happen every other day. I guess maybe settlement or something did not go well, or the timing was wrong. That's why it's exposed. It's something that we see, and we're told whatever happens here stays here. But the white people, when you talk to them, they tell you your country will not develop with these things that are happening. Naval officers, all the security officers are involved in it. So it's not something you just come and start, see what happens. Nobody will penalize. Nobody will be sacked. And this is, my tears are, this is the only resource that we have, only avenue for us to generate foreign exchange that we used to run the country. And then yes, we are lackadaisical about it, like in the fishing area.
Thank you.
And then you wonder why government is just quiet about it. When countries like Angola made $11.8 billion in just 6 months.
I've got to let you go, Engineer Femi. I'm really sorry. Now, Mr. Bolton.
Tied into the question about the cleanup of the
exactly, please, environment. Quickly as we close.
To your callers, I would say they are very correct, right? So it's about the responsibility at the highest levels of government and also insensitivity to the economic imperatives of the times we live in. Oil is not going to continue forever. It would have been very proper for this government to create a bridge connecting our current dependence on oil for our economic purposes and the clean energy future that the rest of the world is approaching. Unfortunately, we have allowed corruption to eat out that connection. The PIA, too, unfortunately,